Right, so Justin Trudeau has came out and said that they want to ban military-style assault rifles, and there's a few things to unpack with this. Number one, it's more than likely an attempt to deflect the attention away from the whole blackface thing. I think this was probably something that they were had in their back pocket that when they needed to use it, they're gonna use it, and they didn't announce any policy when it comes to this kind of stuff. And when you hear people on the left say they want to do this kind of thing, you really don't know what they mean because number one, assault style rifle, technically an assault rifle is a select fire rifle, which are already banned in Canada. They're more than likely talking about semi-automatic rifles, which are also heavily restricted in Canada. When you mean like an AR-15 or something like along those lines. A lot of semi-automatic rifles are prohibited. There is the odd one that's non-restricted, but all AR-15s, AK-47s are prohibited. AR-15s are restricted, which means that the only time you can shoot it is at a range. It needs to be basically locked up at all times if it's not at a range. You need a license to own it. You need a license to transport it. You need a range membership. So there's heavy restriction on semi-automatic rifles in Canada already. There literally, I don't think you could make any more strict regulations on them. Literally, like I don't think you could if you possibly thought about it. I mean, there's maybe the odd thing, but there's already very strict regulations. So what they probably going to do is, I could see them bringing back the long gun registry for non-restricteds because there is some semi-autos that are non-restricted. And the other odd thing about this is that Canada doesn't have any real large-scale mass shootings. The crime in Canada is, at least in a lot of the big cities, is going up. And it's for reasons that the left doesn't want to acknowledge, namely the increased refugee population is probably the biggest one, and the fact that whenever you hear the left propose solutions, it's always gun control or it must be racism or some BS like that. It's never acknowledged the actual problem because the actual problem hurts their chance at power. So the real problem, like I said, is, I mean, the overwhelming majority of guns are illegal. I mean, I've seen things from BC and Toronto that's around, I mean, give or take like 5%, that about 90% of guns used in crimes that are, that can be traced are illegal to begin with, which means they're more than likely brought in through the US or like China or somewhere like that. Usually the US is the most popular one. So implementing any gun, like let's say they ban all guns, it would have at most a 10% effect on crime. 10%. Now, are you willing to want to spend billions of dollars to have a 10% effect on crime? And it wouldn't even affect all crime. It wouldn't affect all crime equally. Some crime would go up. Um, you know, Murder may go down a tiny little bit, but other crimes would go up because in Canada, at least in rural areas, there is some people who use guns for self-defense, even though it is technically illegal. And gun ownership is a pretty, I wouldn't say major, but enough to be acknowledged deterrent against people breaking into houses, at least in rural areas, because crime in a lot of rural areas is going up as well. And the big thing that's causing a lot of this crime is, number one, the economy is doing pretty bad. Number two, the whole refugee situation that we're just bring them all in. It doesn't matter how many. And the problem is the housing is way behind. So poverty, I mean, the best way to put it is poverty doesn't cause crime. People tend to link those two, that if you just give people money that they're not going to commit crime. The biggest predictor of crime is IQ. Crime tends to cluster around about 85, which is why blacks have much higher crime rate. It's not because of racism, it's because IQ. If you take whites with the same IQ as blacks, you look, the crime rates are almost exactly the same. The incarceration rates, the sentencing, all that kind of stuff, it's exactly the same. So it's not a race thing, it's an IQ thing. And the reason why the left doesn't want to admit that is because they have this idea that all differences in outcomes is a result of bigotry or racism or whatever ism. And the IQ solution is a solution that doesn't fit in their worldview, so they're never going to acknowledge that. And the right is afraid to acknowledge the IQ thing because if they do, they'll be called racist. And a lot of people on the right are very milk toast vanilla, you know, like Andrew Scheer. They're afraid to stick their neck out, even though I bet you that they would gain more votes by doing that. In fact, I would guarantee it, because the fact that the PPC is getting so popular is all the evidence you need to that. So, like I said, basically in summary, this was definitely at least somewhat of an attempt to deflect from the blackface thing, and it shows that they have no idea what they're talking about. Like, what do they want to do? Like, what's their exact policy position? That's like saying that, like, we want to ban murder. Like, that would, like, if Andrew Scheer came out and be like, yeah, we want to ban murder, like, people would laugh at him. But when Justin Trudeau does something this stupid that no one calls him out on it, to me it's mind-boggling. But I'll leave it there. That's about all as far as this video goes. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.